There is a sound that is so addicting that it absolutely captivated some of the most influential guitar players of all time. And when we guitar players talk about this sound, we use hilariously great descriptive terms like gooey and whirly and swirly and chewy even, like great words. And the sounds themselves can be heard on some of the most influential tracks of all time. Machine Gun by Jimi Hendrix, Bridge of Sighs by Robin Trower, Breathe by Pink Floyd, and pretty much half of the Killer catalog by Doyle Bramhall too. And most of these sounds came from the original Shin UniVibe that was released in the late 60s. But if you're a modern guitar player looking for the real deal versions of these sounds, and I don't mean an approximation, but the real deal, when you go out looking for a pedal, pretty much they all share three attributes. For one, they're all analog, which is totally fine. For two, the enclosures are really large because there's a light bulb and photoresistors inside that need space to operate optimally, so to speak. And three, they're really expensive. Like really expensive. Crazy, crazy expensive. But all of that has changed as of today because I'm very pleased to announce the arrival of the brand new Strymon UltraViolet Vintage Vibe. UltraViolet is a UniVibe-inspired vintage vibe pedal in our new smaller form factor, so it's the third in the family behind Cloudburst and Brig. And we accounted for all the circuit interdependencies that are so critical for the sound of a classic UniVibe, but we added a few key new features, which make it probably the most flexible vibe pedal ever made. So you can use it for other stuff, not just the Jimi Hendrix thing. However, all that flexibility does not come at the cost of being able to get the real deal versions of those sounds. On the top panel, you have three knobs to help control the sound of UltraViolet. You've got one knob for speed, one for intensity, and one for volume. So speed, of course, is the rate of modulation. Intensity is the depth control, so at maximum, that's the most effect you can get into the signal. And the volume control controls the volume of the pedal and can provide up to 4 dB of boost at maximum. One of the sonic hallmarks of a good version of the classic circuit is actually a bunch of low-end information in the bottom of the modulation swirl. So if you think about those words I used before, without all that low end, you can have the swirl and the twirl, but it's really hard to get the chew because the chew comes from all that bass information being there. So when you dig in, it reacts with the amp differently, especially if the amp has some hair on it already, like Jimi's did. Now, the original units had two operating modes. There was a chorus mode that was 50-50 wet and dry, and a vibrato mode that was 100% wet. And when we were working on UltraViolet, we wanted to make sure that it was more flexible than the original circuit. So just in case you weren't a huge Hendrix fan, you could still find sounds in there that you really liked. So we came up with a new blend mode. It is 70% dry, 30% wet. So it's a more demure version of the chorus mode and allows you to get really nice light trims and phases for all types of music. If you know anything about the history of the original pedals, you probably know that they were famous for sounding very different from one another, even if they were made the same year. You hear stories about, that guy had a really great sounding one and his didn't sound the same or sounded really different or didn't sound as good. And part of that is because there was a bunch of component variation in the guts that were inside the pedal. So the tolerances for light bulbs and photoresistors is very wide. But also, the original units had an internal trim pot to set the bias value, which sets the center of the sweep. So as opposed to giving you one bias value, we figured we'd give you our favorite three. Our favorite three positions on the virtual internal trim pot are now on the top panel, labeled low, mid, and high. The mid control is the classic quintessential vibe sound everyone's familiar with. When you go to the high setting, the sweep moves up and sweeps around the higher frequencies, and we shape the LFO somewhat to make it more apropos for that frequency range. And when you go to the low setting, the sweep centers around the low frequencies. The LFO looks more square wave-ish, but it's still modified by lamp lag. It's the behavior of the light bulb. So if you take into consideration the new blend mode and the 3 bias settings, UltraViolet is the most flexible vibe pedal ever made. Along with sounding killer, the other thing that really differentiates UltraViolet from any other vibe pedal on the market is the fact that it's a member of the new, smaller Strymon family. So it has all the benefits of the platform that it shares with Cloudburst and Brig. So that means full MIDI behavior, TRS MIDI, USB-C, TRS inputs and outputs, 300 presets, rear panel mono to stereo switch, external tap tempo, and our killer discrete JFET input preamp, which makes it feel amazing to play. So if you're a fan of 60s and 70s guitar tones, you owe it to yourself to check it out. And if you're looking for a modulation pedal that's a little different, blend mode and low intensity might just become your favorite tremolo ever. So check us out online at strymon.net, check out all the stuff we did for our YouTube channel, and then go check it out for yourself. It's freaking addicting. So thanks for your time. Cheers.